In 1995, something was brewing in Alberta, Canada. That thing was Nickelback. There seems to be two schools of thought when it comes to Nickelback. Either unabashed hatred or just an overwhelming sense of indifference. Maybe it's the social circles that I run with personally, but I've never had someone come up to me and say, hey, have you heard the new Nickelback album? It's pretty good. And still, even 20 years later, they are the endless butt of jokes, memes, and even protests. Do they deserve the hatred? How did we get here? Let's unpack that. After forming up in 1995 and producing two self-produced albums in 1996 and 1998, they would go on to sign with Roadrunner Records for their 2001 release of Silver Side Up. That's kind of where the problem starts. At the time, Roadrunner Records was predominantly known for signing aggressive, heavy, sometimes groundbreaking bands in the metal genre. Bands like Sepultura, Deicide, Typo Negative, Megadeth, and other similarly heavy and aggressive bands. So to say, Nickelback didn't exactly fit in with their contemporaries on the label. They're featured on a promo sample for the label, featuring other artists like Slipknot, Nightwish, and Machine Head, left followers of the label fairly befuddled, as well as tastemakers who didn't understand why the label was putting so much stock, effort, and money into what felt like a fairly underwhelming band that didn't fit within the genre that the label had been assigned. However, Roadrunner's investment in Nickelback would pay dividends. The lead single off of 2001 Silver Side Up, How You Remind Me, would end up being the most played song of 2002. And the album itself would go on to sell over 5 million copies, despite middling or mediocre reviews. They'd follow up that success in 2003 with what is arguably the same song, which has led to some amazing mashups that could be argued to be better than either song on its own. Adding more fuel to a critical fire, they would release songs like Rockstar and If Everyone Cared, which were a little tone deaf and problematic and not good. However, this specific criticism of their lack of innovation in music or the mediocrity of their playing mostly comes from those who are divested and take great stock in what they're listening to. These songs and albums have still stayed within the public consciousness after all these years, if maybe not for all the right reasons. Could the cartel of popular taste that is the mainstream music listening audience just be deaf? Does the average rock listener just strive to be mediocre in their taste? Are the masses just drooling, imbecilic, primitive Neanderthals who cannot define exquisite taste from the rest of the garbage? Or is Nickelback just not really that bad? For the answer to that, we're going to have to talk about a short-lived Comedy Central show and psychology. In 2004, Comedy Central was advertising the living hell out of a show called Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn. A clip of comedian Brian Posner responding to a prompt about the correlation of violent lyrics and violent behavior ended up being used for that promo, where he would say that no one talks about studies that show that bad music makes people violent, but listening to Nickelback makes me want to kill Nickelback. And let's be honest that young people that watch Comedy Central are the exact types to regurgitate what they hear from Comedy Central. But something fascinating happened here as well, because bands like Creed and Hoobastank were equally ripped on in the same segment. However, those jokes about them have not had the staying power as the ones about Nickelback. But we forgot about Tough Crowd and Colin Quinn. But the whisper down the lane nature of jokes made it so the origin wasn't important for the joke. It just became widely known and acceptable that there was something detestable about Nickelback. We have to talk about normative social influence, or the human tendency to go along with the group. It's one of the reasons why we can have a society. Some of us want to be arsonists. but most of us don't. There's a high social cost to burning down buildings, but there is little to no social cost for belittling someone for something that they like, even when we could just quietly opt out of something that is popular. We're all conditioned to expect judgment for every little thing, and if we can beat someone to the punch on that, it leaves us feeling as though we're a little bit higher up in the pecking order. So we could call all of this rebellion in group, being contrarian for the sake of power, and telling ourselves that is for the sake of individualism. Rebels don't necessarily always want to be different, but want other people to feel the same as they do. Now, I wouldn't go so far to say that Nickelback is some underappreciated artist that we're all going to revere in 30 years as some kind of overlooked classic. More, I think of them as store brand vanilla ice cream. Yeah, it's ice cream and it's inherently good, but if you just look around for a little bit, you're going to find something better. It's not to say that you can't have a moderately satisfying experience with it. It's just that it's the kind of sensation that leaves your brain the second it's not in front of you. Though they claim not to take themselves too seriously, I think Sage Lazaro says it pretty well in that they'd probably take themselves seriously if others did. When you have people constantly making jokes, making memes, petitioning for you to not play sports events or even for the military, throwing rocks at you while you're playing a show, I can see how that could be kind of hard to take in stride. Fun facts about Nickelback. Fun facts about Nickelback. Chad Kroeger married fellow Canadian Avril Lavigne in 2013. And like a good war, it only lasted 2 years. To date, they have sold over 50 million albums worldwide. Everyone already knows the Starbucks story about how they got their name. Rolling Stone named them the second worst band of all time behind Creed. They have never been on American Idol. Chad Kroeger's hair looks like ramen noodles, and you can't unsee that. 78% of their songs are explicitly about sex or drugs. That's a fact that I made up, but it sounds right. And now, a carefully curated reading of select Nickelback lyrics. One step, two step, electric slide. Redfish, bluefish, blow your mind. You're so much cooler when you never pull it out, 'cause you look so much cuter with something in your mouth. Lay that body on the bar and put salt on her hips. I was lying when I told her that I'm only gonna lick her tonight. I like the white stains on your dress, and I love the way you pass the check. I love the good times that you wreck, and I love your lack of self-respect. While you're passed out on the deck, I love my hands around your neck. You and me, sitting in a tree, Fucking. So what have they been up to lately? Well, mostly it's the same. Their 2017 release had maybe a slightly heavier vibe. Kind of gave me some Bullet for My Valentine vibes about it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily that bad of music. Does it lack innovation? Yeah. Is it uninspired? Yeah. Does it vibe? Maybe. I think what's more fascinating is on February 2nd of this year, they released a sea shanty version of Rockstar featuring the Britpop band The Lottery Winners. And I would have loved to have been in that meeting when that got created. Chad Kroeger, the singer for Nickelback, has his own record label as well, which is mostly devoted to signing bands that sound exactly like Nickelback, like Theory of a Dead Man and My Darkest Days. However, they also have signed Carly Rae Jepsen, which is an interesting fact. So do they deserve the hate that they get? No, not really. Some of it, not all of it. Yeah, Chad's lyrics are creepy sometimes, and most of the songs sound the same. But it was a pretty good one song that they wrote. I really like that thing that Chad Kroeger did with Santana. Saving Me was pretty good. But if you want that Monster Energy BFC driving by myself down the highway and this grooves, I like this ironically, unironically kind of vibe, fine. More power to you. There's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, all this time we spent hating them, we could have spent that time hating Trapped. And that'll do it for me today. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell if you want to get notified next time we upload.